Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. In the last part, we continued through the game getting ourselves into Dracula's castle itself, and now it's time for Endgame. Going into our final level, this level can surprise you with how straightforward it is, but how much it'll still try to actively kill you, because there are a lot of chunks of this stage that either have the spikes that do roughly half your health and damage, some enemies placed in dickish places and your ropes to get cheap hits in on you, or just a lot of bottomless pits during fairly major chunks of it. With that said, usually in these sections, the pits aren't so much of a worry as it is, say, the crows trying to knock you into them, and it's only really the enemies that will be placed near ropes in really rude ways that'll give you a lot of trouble in that regard. Hence why I say it's straightforward, but it'll still actively try to kill you. Which, admittedly, very intentional because the boss of this stage is active, to put it very lightly, so having an annoying as hell level on top of an active boss fight would probably just be very frustrating. Now, if there's one thing I really wish this game got, it's that I wish it got the same treatment as the preceding game. Namely, Castlevania The Adventure, and I believe I mentioned this during that game's own LP, got a remake on WiiWare, remake/reimagining, called Castlevania The Adventure Rebirth, done by M2 as part of their Rebirth series of Konami games. Because I think Gradius and I think Contra also got one. I really wish Belmont's Revenge got that treatment as well. Mind you, it needed it a lot less than The Adventure did, because The Adventure, as I mentioned in that LP, like for early Game Boy, it's fine. There's better early Game Boy games, but it could have been worse, I guess. But it needed, like, an actually fun version that wasn't just a fan hack. Belmont's Revenge is fine, but I wish it got its own rebirth, if only because then I feel like people would appreciate this one a little more, because there'd be, okay, hey, yeah, this remake's good. How's the original? Oh, wait, this one's actually good. What the hell? Because if memory serves, I think The Adventure Rebirth isn't even in any of the current Castlevania collections. But given that they remade Haunted Castle for the DS collection, I would love to see some of these other games get their own new version just to help spice things up. But at the same time, they're running out of Castlevania games to re-release at this point, unless they're just like, yeah, here's a 3D collection with a... What do you even do for that? Like a proper remake of the original N64 Castlevania? Well, I guess it would be either that or them going, it's a smaller project, but we also revived that dead Dreamcast game project we were working on at the time. Which that would be really cool, because we obviously know very little about what that game would have been like, but the version of Vampire Killer we have from its trailer is one of my favorite versions of that song. And I'm just really curious on what that would have played like. In my head, it's for some reason closer to, say, like, Maximo than what the 3D Castlevanias ended up being, but damn it, it would have been kind of neat all the same. Oh, also, looking at the video timeline, just reminded me of something. We obviously saw the game's intro crawl back in part 1. For the collection of Game Boy games by Konami that they put this and the first game into over the years on the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, they actively rewrote the intro to be better worded, and they also reworded all the other dialogue in the game where there is some. And I think it is worth looking into that if you're curious. Again, I'm not showing it off because at this point, this is the easier version of this game to track down at this point, because I think the versions in the collections of this and The Adventure are the original releases. I don't think they have the retranslated text. Future me, correct me if I'm wrong on that, please. But hey, in the case I'm wrong on that, hell yeah, at least they realized they should put the better version in. Although effort-wise, that would actually kind of track, considering for the anniversary collection that these two were in, they also translated Kid Dracula finally for that, the NES version of that, which I need to tackle that at some point as well. On my first playthrough, I had a lot of trouble with this specific screen because I kept trying to jump over to the platform, but no, you need to, frankly, to use a very specific reference as a term, you need to AVGN TMNT1 on NES it. You just need to walk across that gap using the size of Christopher's sprite. Always throws me off a little bit when I have to do that, especially in games like this that are more focused on the platforming, but it's fine. Before we go over there, another hidden passageway up here for some extra goodies, so if you want that, make sure you do it. I would especially recommend it for the hearts more than anything. Also, I just realized something I forgot to actually mention earlier in the LP during one of the levels is another mechanic that's also going to return in this stage. We obviously have the ropes already. Back during, I think it was the Rock Castle, we had spiders that span web out of their rears. Those webs are also ropes, and you need to use them in this stage and in that stage. These spiders will retract the web eventually, and that will also retract the platform you use as a rope. But if you kill the spiders, that's not an issue anymore. But there's times where you're not exactly easily able to kill the spiders in that case, which, well, usually the timing is generous enough where it's not going to be that big of a deal. Again, this is a much kinder game than both the adventure and honestly than some of the mainline console games. Like, I genuinely think this game on the whole is easier than, at the least, Castlevania 3. 4 is probably the overall easiest in the series, barring like 2 specific boss fights. I guess maybe Rondo of Blood is harder in it, but only just, and that's just because of how many things that game will throw at you in new ways. This next set of jumps coming up right here after this specific Ghost Knight is where that can really be a potential issue, because we're going to have a spider, but then we're going to have an ice block, and then 2 other spiders. There is no way to cause the other 2 spiders to start moving downwards without getting too close, so you need to risk the jump and just go for the ropes while they move along them. Which, stressful, but not too dangerous, which I think is a very interesting thing that platformers can do that a lot of other genres can do, but just not as obviously, where there's something that is more stressful than it is difficult. And I actually enjoy moments like that a lot. With that, we've done the level effectively. We are now at the crawl to the boss fight, and, well, based on the unique music, it's time for the end game to truly begin. Not really much you can do in terms of preparing, because I don't even think there's a turkey around here you get for food, but, well, be ready, because this fight's a doozy. I'm surprised you made it this far. The rebirth of Dracula will occur soon. You cannot destroy me, Father. Next boss fight is Soliel himself. Soleil's big thing is just trying to moving from left to right across the screen, jumping up the platforms or just falling down them whenever he so feels like it. But also whipping when he's either too close to you or throwing daggers up towards the opposite corner that will then move downwards at the edge. I think they can also sometimes move diagonally depending on your own placement like that. This can be a lot to keep track of, especially when you're not sure if Soliel himself is going to jump or fall. React rather than be aggressive here, because otherwise you're probably going to take a lot of silly damage you don't need to take. I think you might be able to bait him out some directions at times, but it's really just luck of the draw on that. This can be troublesome, to say the least. But that's Soliel down, so day's saved, right? What do you mean there's still 9 minutes left in the video at minimum? Huh. That's weird. Must be a very long ending. Ouch. What am I doing? Oh, Father. Since Dracula cannot use my powers, Dracula will use the power of the 4 castle spirits. Hurry up, quickly. Yeah, of course Soliel himself isn't the final boss. We still got a big old Drac to fight up against, and we got one final level here that's more of just a crawl to the final boss himself. These are candles here to restore your stuff if you need them. But prepare for, honestly, like, top 3 hardest Dracula fights. This is actually my worst point in the game to me, outside of the Bone Dragon boss fight, because this Dracula sucks. His whole thing is teleporting. Now, we've seen him do that before. Hell, we've seen him do that in many of my favorites of the console games. But in this one, he'll only teleport to the platforms around the screen. His only attack is that spread shot of bullets, just like a certain Dr. Wily capsule. Avoiding those is the biggest game here, because not only do they hurt for one thing, but there's very few safe points because of how wide the screen is compared to how wide their spread becomes. Often you'll see me pull very dangerous stunts like jumping like that to avoid them because at least I know I can do that. Figuring out the save points is the real trial here, on top of not falling into the spikes to take extra damage. Dying here is also punishing, as you have to go through that crawl again for one thing, yes, but you might not get enough of a whip upgrade to really give yourself a good vantage point here. This fight, on my first playthrough, I was on for like 2 hours minimum. I do not like this fight. There's more annoying and evil feeling Dracula boss fights in the series. Hi, Dracula X on Super Nintendo. But this is easily one of my least favorites in the whole series. A shame too, because you go from, honestly, the Adventure's final boss being really easy to this being like this, and then honestly, the final boss in Legends is fine. I remember that just being relatively not hard, not too easy, just nice and balanced feeling. Albeit I haven't played Legends at this point in probably like 10 years. The war is over. Dracula's scheme was foiled because of the combined power of Christopher and Soliel. Once again, the world is at peace. And then... Soliel has overcome the Dark Curse, and will continue to fight Dracula and his forces. Soon after, the Belmont family has a long history of vampire hunters. The legend will always continue. reading that outro text there only just now made me realize that Castlevania 1 on Game Boy has just a Belmont going after Dracula. Yet Castlevania 2 on Game Boy has a Belmont fighting a curse set by Dracula. That's a weird moment of paralleling with the NES games. What if that was completely intentional? Well, either way, that's Belmont's Revenge. This is such an improvement over the adventure that it's really absurd almost. The Adventure is a game I only really recommend it if you're really curious. I wholeheartedly recommend this if you like Castlevania 1 or 3 on the NES. The only really sour notes are 2 of the last 3 boss fights are just not that fun to me. And the third of those last 3 boss fights can definitely be overwhelming, but at least it's very conquerable. The music kicks ass, the level design's a big improvement. This, honestly, is probably my favorite of the 3 Game Boy Castlevanias. I say probably because it has been, at this point, probably over a decade since I last played Castlevania Legends. So outside of remembering liking some of the music, I don't remember exactly how I feel about it at this point, let alone how my tastes have changed since 2014. So I guess whenever I cover that for an LP, we'll get a better idea of how I feel about it then. The next time we see Castlevania on the channel, though, is, if it's not Legends, I'm really hoping it'll finally be time for me to do Rondo of Blood, because there's just been some minor things holding me up from doing that for so long. If it's not that, it'll probably be one of the other Kid Draculas. Or maybe I'll just say, finally, screw it, and go on to one of the other Igavanias. Because I did Symphony of the Night years ago at this point. I still haven't even gotten, like, Circle of the Moon or Aria, and I really want to, because I like those games a lot. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, have a great night, take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.